There has been one fish that has been missing from our rivers and our streams since, like, I believe the 1900s, like in the early 1900s. So Nicole Watson joining us now on the MegaCast. She's a Ph.D. student over at the MSU Department of Fisheries and Wildlife, trying to work on bringing back the Arctic Grayling. With that, Nicole, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I was waiting for Tyler to say go green.
Well,
Go white.
yeah, good point.
Hey, Nicole, this is really kind of fascinating to me because I will say before today, never really thought about this. And we've had the DNR on before, and I know they brought it up. But really looking into the history of why the Arctic grayling is disappearing from Michigan. Give us a little bit of history on this fish.
Sure. So Arctic grayling was our predominant stream salmonid that we had in the Lower Peninsula. So specifically the northern Lower Peninsula. So if you look at your Michigan map, anything north of your knuckles was Arctic grayling habitat. There were very few, if not any, brook trout that were in the Lower Peninsula in late 1800s-ish time. And brown trout were also not present at the time. So a lot of people think that the trout population or salmonid population that we have right now may be what we've always had. And there's Pacific salmonids and brown trout that were introduced to the region. And then other environmental impacts that also occurred in the mid to late 1800s. So you had competition from these other non-native species, but you also had habitat destruction through the ways that logging practices were done at the time, and also overfishing. So overharvest of Arctic grayling, the environmental destruction and competition all led to the extirpation of Arctic grayling from the state of Michigan in the Lower Peninsula in approximately 1906 to 1908, and completely from the state in 1936. So so it was considered a localized extinction, so an extirpation. And we've tried to bring them back in the past, and we've had some complications, but there's new technologies out that are really giving us a lot of hope that we can bring them back again.
So the Arctic grayling, I was reading on the DNR website, it was only native to Michigan and Montana. Did Montana experience the same problems that we did?
So they started to see declines in their Arctic grayling population later in the 1900s. So they were a little more remote and less accessible. So they didn't have as many of the impacts that we did in Michigan on their population. They are also in northern Arctic regions in North America as well. So there's populations in Alaska, Northwest Territories in Canada, and other regions in Canada as well, and some isolated populations in I believe Asia as well.
So this problem really is human made. We created this issue.
Yeah, definitely. So, we've learned so much since, and now it's really time to try and bring these fish back again.
So why is that important?
There's a huge heritage with this fish in Michigan. So if you think about it, if you're familiar with Grayling, Michigan, if you drive north, you may just drive right past it. Otherwise, it's a popular stop for a lot of folks that are traveling. And Grayling, Michigan was actually named after the fish, the Arctic grayling. And, it's pretty tragic that we no longer have it here. And plus, a lot of indigenous peoples also have strong connections to Arctic grayling throughout their history as well. So to be able to bring back this fish has really good value.
So how do you go about that? I know that you mentioned it's been tried in the past without success. Why do you think this is going to be different?
Yeah, so we're really doing a lot of research, and that's where my PhD work comes in at Michigan State. So through my research, my goal is to determine the time at which these fish, first of all, are imprinting to the streams, and if they select a familiar water type. And that answers one of the complications that occurred in the past, that the fish would be reintroduced into the streams and you would have rapid outmigration out of the stream. So you would raise them in a hatchery, then you would introduce them to the stream, and before you know it, they would disappear. So by determining when these fish are actively imprinting to that water, and seeing when they're choosing familiar water sources, that'll help negate that issue. And then I also aim to determine predation rates between young brook and brown trout on juvenile, so grayling fry, so the very early life stage. And I'm also aiming to determine the pressures of competition and that impact of competition between young brook trout and grayling, and then also brown trout and Arctic grayling as well. So all at the age 0 life history. And that'll help us determine where these fish can fit in. And before that, this research hadn't been done, so we were really unsure of those complex interactions between the species.
So it was really one of those things, let's put them in and pray that they are able to survive, and it didn't happen. So now you're taking a step back and trying to, be more selective in how you go about it. Nicole, if I can ask you, you said imprinting. Can you explain to us a little bit more what that means?
Sure. So imprinting, if you're familiar with Pacific salmonids, Chinook, coho, steelhead, things like that, a lot of those fish will, they rear in the stream. So they incubate, spawn in the stream, and then they migrate out to the ocean or to the Great Lakes for that matter. And as an adult, they will come back to that location that they were hatched. And so that would be a good example of imprinting. So a lot of it is taking that scent of the water. So fish have a very sensitive sense of smell, more than the most sensitive dog for smell wise. So they can pick up minute chemical compositions in the water, and they can use that to imprint. And so they put it pretty much in their memory, and they store it away until they're going to need to return to that location. So they don't just hatch and stay in one spot. They're going to hatch and they'll migrate around, but they will typically stay in that familiar watershed. So learning if they're imprinting, say, as early as the eye to egg stage, which literally for a fish is a fish egg with 2 eyes. So the eye to egg stage could be as early as imprinting occurs, but it can also occur at various other life stages as well. So when they hatch, when they come out of the substrate, and any other physiological changes that are occurring could also be triggering imprinting. So I'm looking to determine what those timings are for those Arctic grayling.
Nicole Watson with us here on the MegaCast. She's a Ph.D. student over at the Michigan State University Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. She is working with the Michigan DNR on the Arctic Grayling initiative. And Nicole, if I can ask you, where does your research stand right now? What's the next step?
So right now I'm in my last laboratory season, and I'm transitioning into building a individual-based population model for the fish as well. So I'm going to incorporate the data that I've collected in the lab and apply it into a computer model that can be used to determine the overall impacts. It will help us determine the total number of eggs that we'll need to reintroduce, which will help Michigan DNR in that effort. And I will be analyzing and writing up my data here shortly. And it really coincides well with the Arctic Grayling initiative with Michigan DNR. So I'll have all my data ready before we're ready to put fish into the streams. So earlier this year in May, I traveled to Alaska and brought back the next broodstock cohort. So a broodstock is going to mature into the adult fish that the state collects the eggs and milk from to introduce into the streams. So we'll go ahead and put those fish in once the broodstock had matured. We'll collect that eggs and milk. We're still about probably 4-ish years off from actually putting fish eggs in the water right now into Michigan streams. But yeah, it's really coincided with my research occurring first before the state of Michigan is ready to select specific streams for reintroduction.
How long have you been working on this project?
Since 2018, I've been attending meetings for the Arctic Grayling Initiative since its inception in 2016, and then just worked on obtaining funding for my research between then, 2016, and when I started in 2018. So Yeah, it's been a long process, but it's definitely Arctic grayling are an amazing species, and to be able to have an impact and help bring them back to the state is very impactful.
For some of us, we're like, wow, that's a lot of effort to bring a one fish back to the state of Michigan. How did you get interested in the Arctic grayling and this project?
Yes, I always used to vacation in Grayling. I now actually have a seasonal cabin up there. My husband and I fly fish. We hunt quite a bit. So I just started to learn more of the story by visiting Grayling quite a bit and seeing all of these old mounted Arctic grayling here and there. And the more you learn about their history, the more you realize that you really want to make a difference and help bring this fish back. So I just really started doing research. Even before I started working on my master's, I was already looking into what I wanted to focus on for my PhD, which was to really get to the bottom of what was preventing Arctic grayling from being able to reestablish populations in the state. And yeah, it just so happened it was perfect timing for the Grayling Initiative to kick up and me to start my PhD.
Did COVID-19 and the pandemic sideline your research at all, or did it help speed it along because you had more time?
I was supposed to be doing laboratory research in 2020, and with the COVID-19 pandemic, I was unable to travel to Alaska to collect eggs. So I had to take a step back for that year, but it did allow me time to revamp the protocol, see if I had any gaps that I needed to fulfill this year in the research collection, and it was a lot of good like reorganization and prep. So it was unfortunate that it happened, but it was put to good use for sure.
Well, that's good to know. And maybe you learned something during that time that's going to help make this project successful.
Yeah, definitely. I was able to do even more background research than I typically do. And yeah, just get that refocusing on everything that we needed to have done to start up the lab again this year. Because we do a full shutdown at the end of every season for the laboratory research, and then we reopen each year. So it was good to get everything back open this year and get back into the lab.
We're talking with Nicole Watson. She's a Ph.D. student over at the Michigan State University Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. And Nicole, when you were going out and seeking funding, how hard is it for you to convince people that this is worth the money, we need the money, at a time when we have so many other things going on in the world?
Yeah, it took a while. So the Michigan Arctic Grayling Initiative, to begin with, is a really grassroots crowd-funded type of project. And it's also pretty costly. I mean, Michigan DNR needed to revamp the Odin State Fish Hatchery to have an isolation unit put in. And then also my research needing to get funded as well, plus additional projects. So, we were really able to start a big collaboration. So there's over 55 organizations and individuals that are all part of the Michigan Arctic Grayling Initiative to begin with. And so a lot of it was just trying to talk to the right people, and really just stressing the importance of bringing this fish back, and knowing that, Montana saw success in reestablishing their grayling population after declines, and learning from Montana, learning from what we've done in the past, and just showing that, yes, we do think that this is possible and we can do it again. And just to know that people have had a part in bringing this iconic fish back. I mean, Arctic grayling looks nothing like any of the salmonids that we currently have in the state of Michigan. And it's unfortunate that it was lost to begin with. So being able to correct that is really, it's a pivotal moment. And just getting additional people to realize that and to help is a great thing to do.
And with that, if I can ask you, in your research, were you able to at least try to find out why it was native to Michigan to begin with?
So one of the main reasons that you had two glacial relic populations is just the way that the glaciers actually retreated historically. So that's why you had those relic populations in Montana and in Michigan. Those were the two populations that were there. and then the rest in like northern Canada and Alaska is still established as well.
Nicole Watson with us here on the MegaCast. She's a Ph.D. student for the Michigan State University Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. She is also working with the Michigan DNR on the Arctic Grayling initiative. And with that, Nicole, it's been a fascinating conversation. I've learned so much. Is there anything that maybe I didn't ask, since you are the expert, that you want to share?
Yeah, so just to share a little bit of the preliminary results of the research, what we're finding is Arctic grayling and brook trout do coexist quite well together. And so that is really giving the reintroduction initiative a lot of hope that the reintroduction will indeed be successful. In the lab, brown trout do stress the Arctic grayling and limit their growth overall, but seeing that success and the positive growth in the grayling in the presence of brook trout has really been a good thing to see, and is, like I said, really giving us hope for the reintroduction.
Well, we wish you the best of luck on the remainder of your research, and we hope to see this come to fruition, but you're saying it's probably, what, 4 years off?
Yeah, so we have to wait until the cohort completely sexually matures. So the fish that came back this year, 2021, will mature in approximately 3 to 4 years. Once those fish are mature, we're able to cross the brood stocks that we have to obtain the eggs and milt. So once, like I said, once they're mature, we'll be able to start putting fish in the water.
Well, best of luck to you, and thank you for your dedication to this issue.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.